my memories of the past.
And now, Dark Matters. Here's Don Ecker.
I hear it fading, I can't speak it. Oh, else you will dig my grave.
Welcome back to another edition of Dark Matters Radio. Tonight's show has been some time in the making. As a matter of fact, this has been, in essence, one of the most difficult programs that I've put together for some time. I think the reason for that will become apparent as the show goes on, but I've had to go back through my files, through my records, and audio tapes going 20 years into the past. And the reason? Well, back in those days, as many of you know, I was the director of research for UFO Magazine. And at that time, there was no doubt that UFO Magazine was the magazine of record covering the UFO beat. Back in those days, and I'm talking about the late 1980s, the very, very early 1990s, we made our mark by doing a series of extensive behind-the-scenes investigative reports on not only cases in the UFO field, but also individuals making a major, huge flash. Now, tonight's show, we're going to be dealing with a guy that actually, in November of 2001, was killed in a shootout with the police in Ecker, Arizona, and after having shot a police officer in the head. Now, this man's name was William Bill Cooper. And you may be asking yourself, why, after all those years, would I be doing a show on Cooper? Well, recently, and I'm talking about as I do this show the last couple of weeks, my producer lent me an audio clip that he heard where Cooper was being lauded on the net as being a visionary, someone that basically galvanized the patriot movement. Now, if you're not familiar with UFOs, if you're not familiar with the patriot movement, you may be wondering just who in the world was Bill Cooper? Well, for that, we've got to go literally back into the past. Now, this has been a long process, and many of you listening to this show will not have even probably been around back in the mid-1980s, but we've got to go back basically to the dawn of the computer revolution. Oh yeah, computers. Now, circa 1985, the PC, the Apple, the Amiga, whatever your flavor was in those days, basically was a box that was at home. There was no internet as we know it today. Now, sure, there was an internet, but it was primarily concerned and only used mostly by the Department of Defense and college universities. If you bought a computer and you wanted to go online, you had to have a telephone modem. And if you had a telephone modem that allowed you to go online, well, the next thing you had to do was find some place to go. The solution? Bulletin board systems. Now, in 1985, most computer bulletin board systems were primarily concerned with computers and things about computers. But down in Fountain Hills, Arizona, was a guy by the name of Jim Spicer who had a different idea. That idea? Why not do something concerned with not only UFOs, but the weirder side of life, the paranormal, things that were periodically cropping up in the news, like the Mothman, the Lizard Man down in Georgia, UFOs, of course, and Paranet got its start. Now, before it was all said and done, there were Paranet BBSs that literally spanned the globe. I happened to be a part of the Paranet system back in those days. As a matter of fact, I was their security director because there were people even then that tried to hack and crack into Paranet. Now, I got my first computer in 1987. And if I tell you what I had in those days, but when I bought it, I was just happier than could be. And even though, in hindsight, I recognized how I got taken for a ride, I had a system that allowed me to do quite a bit. Now, let me tell you about it. It was a Tandy, also known as Radio Shack computer, a 1000EX system. It had an 8088, an 8088 CPU. It came stock with 256K of memory, and I put more in there until it reached the whopping total of about 384. I had a dot matrix printer. The computer itself was basically a keyboard with one internal floppy drive that took a 360K 5.25-inch floppy. But by the time I had it all tricked out in 1987, early 1988, hey, I was going places. And I had a 300 baud modem. Now, if you're not sure what that is, look it up online. You're going to be shocked that I bought from Radio Shack to the tune of about $100. Now, even though there was no internet, there were pay-as-you-go services. And what I'm talking about primarily were services like CompuServe, later Delphi, and several others. I ended up going up on CompuServe with my 300 baud modem, costing me $6.40 an hour. And on one of my journeys up there, I stumbled over something called the Issues Forum. While rooting through there, I came across a number of UFO files. And I came across something else, something called MJ12, which had recently been put there by Bill Moore and Jamie Chandra, the original MJ12 documents. Now, this isn't a show about that, but while I was rooting around, I came across something else called the John Lear hypothesis. Now, John Lear was the son of William Lear of Learjet fame, and he had written a document that was absolutely mind-blowing in its allegations. I'm not going to go into that either, but I was kind of shocked. If you're interested, I'm sure you can still find it online. And I called John up. We spent a couple hours on the phone, and a week or so later, he UPS'd me a huge stack of documents, including a videotape. Now, reading through this stuff, which basically were documents that were supporting his hypothesis, I found out about Paranet. Paranet was the place that John Lear had first uploaded his document through Jim Spicer. I became a user on the Paranet bulletin board system down in Arizona, and things kind of took off. Now, there was a lot of vitriol that was being spewed about even then, not only at Lear's hypothesis, but there were pro-MJ12 proponents, anti-MJ12 proponents. As a matter of fact, it's quite a bit like things are today in the UFO field, where everybody apparently hates everybody. So, along about July, another guy popped up on Paranet. And this guy popped up supporting John Lear initially with 50% of everything he said. This guy's name was William Cooper, Bill Cooper. And things then really began to get interesting. But before I get too wrapped up in all this, let me do this first. I want to play for you that audio clip that Lan sent me weeks ago to let you know what, at least in some areas today, is being said about Mr. Cooper.
About what's going on in America. They sow the seeds of discontent
for the coming time when America is being led towards this path that we believe it's being led to. We believe America is being set up right now. It's being staged for an insurrection.
Now, in just a few of the people that we've mentioned so far in this show, I want to point something out. Most of these hosts owe their existence to a man named William Cooper, who single-handedly blazed a trail which opened up investigations into various causes, including the abusive practices of government, the legality of tax laws within the United States, investigations into UFO phenomena, and the Illuminati higher-level Masonic conspiracy that Cooper, from his inside knowledge as a military intelligence agent, knew existed within the shadow government of the United States. Cooper pretty much single-handedly carved out an entire form of media that became underground shortwave radio that pulled in many of later practitioners, including many cheap imitators that even to this very day continue to masquerade under the banner of being heirs to William Cooper. Cooper's group still continues to operate and put out information in a legitimate. Nevertheless, Bill Cooper paid the ultimate price for it when November 5th, 2001 was engaged in a gun battle with police officers in Ecker, Arizona, and as a result, deputies shot and killed him on his property. These are the seedbeds of the patriot movement, and Bill Cooper is a figure that looms large. For all his flaws and for even some of the errors that he may have propagated, Bill Cooper opened up an ability for underground radio to truly have some legitimacy and take away some of the stain of what was called, quote, conspiracy theories.
All right, we are back. Now, look, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, you are listening to Dark Matters Radio, heard exclusively on Cyberstation USA, and this is a classic broadcast from Dark Matters Radio on Cyberstation USA. Right, we are back. Now, in 1988, there was something else that happened that also caused quite a firestorm in not only UFO circles, but that literally spanned the globe. George Knapp, investigative television journalist at KLAS Channel 8 in Las Vegas, ran a series of specials where he talked about a super secret and at that time very, very little known area as part of the Nellis Range that was called Area 51. Area 51 was an area that was so super secret that nobody had a clue what went on out there. This, however, happens to be one of the places where super secret aircraft were test flown, developed out there. Things like the U-2, going back to the mid to latter 1950s. Later on, the aircraft, the Blackbird, the SR-71. And then he brought somebody on in electronic blackout that he called Dennis, a pseudonym. And this individual claimed to have been a physicist out there that worked on, of all things, recovered alien technology. Oh yeah, crashed flying saucers. Now, talk about creating a firestorm. Later on, Knapp was to do another series of interviews, about a year later, as a matter of fact. But now he identified the individual, a man by the name of Robert Lazar, Bob Lazar. Now, UFO Magazine, of course, was extraordinarily interested in this. And since I knew most of the players down there, by this time I knew John Lear, I certainly knew George Knapp. I later met and discussed, talked to, and interviewed Bob Lazar and Lazar's very good buddy, Gene Huff. We became privy to a lot of information that was not yet then public. Now, of course, there were a lot of people that claimed that Lazar was not the real thing. There were people that alleged that he was a